Well, we talked about the Occupy Wall Street protesters. One of the folks with them and another ally in the Mad as Hell narrative, Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders. I shouldn't say mad as hell narrative, because having talked with you, Senator, I actually am quite clear that you are mad as hell. If you were to look at these protesters and their energy, and you were to look at the energy in our Get Money Out petition with the message, what I call the caveman communication, Senator, 3 words: get money out. How do you interpret the rising energy?
I think more and more people understand that if we're going to get out of this recession, if we're going to create the millions of jobs we desperately need, you know what? You have to look at Wall Street. These are the crooks who have plunged us into the horrendous economic situation we're in right now, and we're going to need fundamental reform of Wall Street, breaking up these behemoths. They're demanding that capital on Wall Street goes into the productive economy, create real jobs for our people. So focusing attention on Wall Street is exactly the right thing to do, in my judgment.
I guess the only place where I would disagree with you, Senator, and maybe it's not so much of a disagreement as a distinction, is what Ari was saying earlier, which is that because Wall Street is so active in financing the political system, that while the need to address the gross dysfunction in the capital markets, which you described perfectly, that the only way to address that is to cut off the flow of money from Wall Street to Washington by, again, pushing to get the money out between those two institutions.
Well, that's not in opposition to what I'm saying. Obviously, we have a horrendous campaign finance situation in America today. But it's not just Wall Street. Wall Street is very, very big in terms of funding their friends and punishing those of us who are opposed to them. But it's not just Wall Street. It's the energy companies. It's the military industrial complex. It's the drug companies. It's big money flooding Congress with campaign contributions and lobbying. Clearly, we need real campaign finance reform. And I should tell you, Dylan, that the Citizens United decision obviously made a very bad situation worse, because now these guys can put money into campaigns with no disclosure at all. Nobody knows who they are or how much they're spending.
Which makes it how important, by your measure, that we get money, that we make getting money out a central issue in this presidential election. How important is it that 2012 becomes a referendum on getting money out of our political system?
Well, I think, as I said, the current campaign finance situation is an absolute disaster. We're talking about huge amounts of money coming in from very wealthy individuals, large corporations who want to dominate the agenda in Washington. Citizens United has made it even worse. So if we are talking about the United States as being a vital democracy where ordinary people have power to determine what happens, obviously, you need real campaign finance reform. In my view, that means public funding of elections, getting corporate money out of the system.
But we have to begin with knowing we got to get the money out, and then we can have the debate about how we're going to replace that system. Senator, what is your interpretation of the efforts on China from your colleagues, particularly on currency manipulation and trade? And obviously the White House doesn't seem to be on board with this. The Treasury never classifies China as a currency manipulator. And this is a very good campaign platform. But how much of what we're seeing from the politicians in the Senate is intended at really engaging China, and how much of it is bipartisan pandering?
Well, I certainly hope that we address the China issue in a very bold way. As you know, Dylan, we have a huge trade deficit with China. We have seen corporation after corporation in this country shut down, throw American workers out on the street, and move to China. We've lost millions of good-paying jobs as a result of this disastrous trade policy. I am interested in sustainable energy. And to give you an example, what China is doing is saying to solar companies in America and all over the world, come to China, we will give you very low interest financing, we'll build the buildings for you. How do you compete against that kind of subsidization? I don't think you do. So I think we need new trade policies, with China, with the rest of the world, based on fair trade principles, not unfettered free trade.
All right, my last question, unrelated to anything we just discussed, although it's actually related to everything we just discussed. Yesterday, Mark Ames and Yasha Levine broke a story in The Nation magazine. They exposed a letter, a traffic between, I believe it was Friedrich Hayek, who was the Nobel laureate, and Charles Koch, who was financing him. The letter basically exposed, and we talked about this yesterday, that Hayek, who was the Nobel laureate, who was being hired to advocate for the disassembly of the American healthcare or of any socialized system of Social Security or health, was very concerned for his own health and Social Security, and Charles Koch assured him that he himself would have the benefits of Social Security. It's just that those down the line would not. I'm less concerned about the scandal of that interaction than I am about the assertion that money has not only influenced our politics, but is now actually purchasing ideas through think tanks and is infecting the entire polarity of debate.
Yeah. Dylan, I have to tell you that's old news. Right-wing money from the Koch brothers and from other right-wingers has created, they literally have created a number of right-wing think tanks, and those guys are on TV, they're in the newspapers every day, pushing the corporate agenda, pushing the agenda for the wealthiest people in this country.
Last question, and I'll let you go, Senator. What do you think about, not that you have any a horse in the race, but what do you think about my idea of approaching the Occupy Wall Street crowd, which obviously has a tremendous amount of energy, and suggesting to them that the action item for 2012 is to get money out?
Well, I think that's part and parcel of the kinds of reforms we need in the United States of America. I'm going to just give you an example. Wall Street spent billions of dollars, Dylan, fighting to deregulate their industry, which led us to the illegal behavior which caused the recession. So these guys, Wall Street and these other large companies, are spending huge amounts of money influencing politics in America and the legislative agenda. And of course, we've got to get that money out of politics.
Senator, it is an absolute delight to talk to you. Thanks for the time. Bernie Sanders.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator. Turning away from that conversation to our defense and intelligence posture. As you may have heard, U.S. intelligence has killed a major, what is being presented as a major terror threat, and I might add, credibly so, an American-born individual, an al-Qaeda leader. You may have heard the name Anwar al-Awlaki, or al-Awlaki. I have a hard time with his last name. Al-Awlaki was known as the next generation of al-Qaeda. It was known for using social media like Facebook and YouTube to inspire lone wolf terrorists. It gets better. He's said to have had ties to nearly every major planned attack on the United States. That includes the failed underwear bomber, the deadly Fort Hood shooter, and the foiled Times Square bomber. Remember him? Not to mention a connection to 3 of the 9/11 hijackers. Sounds like a bad guy. President Obama weighed in on it earlier today.
Death of al-Awlaki is a major blow to al-Qaeda's most active operational affiliate. He took the lead in planning and directing efforts to murder innocent Americans.
The expanded U.S. drone program we told you about earlier this week, by the way, was in fact utilized. It was a drone that killed al-Awlaki. Now, let's be phenomenally clear. There is no question that the world may be a safer place with this man's death. He was clearly working on multiple levels to provide support and action to harm American interests. But there may be 2 more interesting and controversial issues that this brings up. Number 1, is it really in our long-term interest to have remote-controlled drones flying what seems like all around the world in a web, taking people out on remote control at the individual discretion of whoever the sitting president of this country is? And 2, should it be legal for the president or the U.S. government to murder a U.S. citizen, regardless of how horrible they may be, without giving them the rights of a U.S. citizen in due process? And who do you trust to make that decision? Our Friday mega panel, MSNBC contributors Touré and Crystal Ball, along with Ari Berman, contributing writer for The Nation. You're nodding your head. Why?
It's absolutely very frightening for us to be killing U.S. citizens without due process.
This is a bad guy.
We know that, but what do we do with U.S. citizens? We put them through a trial. So I would like to see, even though we have this evidence, if it's so clear-cut, arrest him, put him in solitary confinement, put him through a trial, give him the death penalty if that's what we're going to do. I'm very nervous at killing people without due process, even though this situation seems clear. The next time, it won't be so clear.
We get it.
It'll be like, well, this is
the home of the slippery slope.
Yeah.
Well, and think about where we have come, and by we, I mean the left. Where have we come from? We used to be outraged.
Are you calling me left?
No, I'm not. I'm calling we, me, and whoever else wants to affiliate with the left. All right, not you, Dylan.
Teasing,
You're whatever you want to be.
You're post-partisan.
I am. I'm here to help.
Don't offend the host.
Yes,
That's the number one rule of being on the show.
No.
So think of this, though. We used to be outraged at unauthorized.
The left used to be outraged.
Yeah, at unauthorized, warrantless wiretapping. Now the President of the United States,
elected by the left,
whoever they may be, we're not always going to have Barack Obama, can single out any U.S. citizen and be judge, jury, and executioner with no oversight. None.
Okay. So I want you to put yourself in the shoes of a typical conservative viewer, listening to this mamby-pamby conversation about how terrible it is and, oh my goodness, how can we go doing this? This guy was a terrorist. We are in a war. We are in a situation where there are individuals who are, and that's, by the way, not in dispute. There are individuals, whether it was this one or somebody else, who are actively working on a regular basis to try to perpetrate harm to the interest of America. And so all Crystal and Touré and all it's all lovely that you are worried about the democracy. I got to prevent people from getting killed, and the best way to do that is with drones on my discretion. That's a hard thing to get past.
Yeah, so let me put my Tea Party hat on and then argue against the Tea Party at the same time. Which
please do.
Number
This
one,
is easy.
What's the potential blowback? So we use these drones all the time in Afghanistan. They kill innocent men and women. That leads to more attacks on U.S. troops.
They call that collateral damage.
But that puts our troops, number one, at more risk. Number two, what if it gets flipped and China and Russia start doing it? What if they start taking out places? What if U.S. people, what if Americans are
Then it'll be like
in the
Star
crosshairs?
Wars. Star Wars, basically.
Well, if Americans are getting killed, it won't be a very cool version of Star Wars.
No, it will not. that's a bumper sticker. You got anything else on the rebuttal?
Well, I would just say, in terms of, I think it's a good rule of thumb, and I don't know if it's necessarily a conservative position, but if it was right under Bush, it's right under Obama, and if it was wrong under Bush, it's wrong under Obama. And so I think that's the standard. What's the precedent we're setting here? And I agree with Tori and Crystal. This is a very dangerous precedent.
I mean, you talk about it's a bad guy, but
and he's
very
bad.
And he's trying
he wants to kill you.
Right, he's trying to damage Americans, right? But we are damaging the fabric of what America is by changing America to say we don't need due process to try to kill or to go out and kill this person who wants to harm us. That we have to still be America properly.
And if you're a constitutional conservative, you have to care about the Constitution, and these are one of the most basic rights of the Constitution,
which is due process.
Yeah.
The panel stays. The conversation continues straight ahead. Forget about improving our educational system. Our special